students, so we have studied about the basic introduction of the cell. We have studied about the cell theory, who proposed advanced cell theory. We have studied about the different shapes of the cells, different types of the cells, different diameters of the cells. We have also studied about types of the cells, that is prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. We have studied about the structure of a prokaryotic cell, that is a bacteria, and the structures of the eukaryotic plant cell and animal cell. Today we are going to study about the plasma membrane. So what is plasma membrane? Plasma membrane is nothing but a membrane which is present around the living cell, right? It is a membrane surrounding a living cell, right? So plasma membrane is a membrane surrounding a living cell. There are certain properties which a plasma membrane should possess, right? So which are the properties which a plasma membrane should have, right? So which are the properties of plasma membrane? The first property of plasma membrane is that plasma membrane is selectively permeable membrane. It is a selectively permeable membrane, right? So what does that mean? What is the meaning of a selectively permeable membrane? Plasma membrane is a selectively permeable membrane, which means it selectively allows only certain substances to enter into the cell or to exit the cell. Say for example, this is the plasma membrane, right? This is the plasma membrane, and these are certain pores or certain proteins which are present within the plasma membrane, right? So over here there are large sized particles also, and there are small sized particles also. This is inside of the cell, this is outside of the cell. So these smaller sized particles can enter within the cell through the plasma membrane, but plasma membrane selectively permits whether these particles are actually required by the cell or not. Even though cell doesn't possess any of these particles, but if there is no requirement to the cell, then these particles will not be able to cross the plasma membrane. Say this is a very large sized particle, right? And if there is a need of this large sized particle, then plasma membrane is going to allow the movement of this particle from outside the cell to within the cell by the process of endocytosis. What is endocytosis? Endocytosis is nothing but cell eating, right? So plasma membrane will undergo folding. It will undergo folding. It will take up the particle, and then it will again go unfolding to get straightened. So the particle which was outside is now inside by the process of endocytosis, right? So the first property that the plasma membrane should possess is that it should be selectively permeable. It should selectively permit the movement of certain particles or ions or molecules from inside the cell to outside, or from outside the cell to inside the cell. The second property a plasma membrane should possess is a quasi-fluid nature. The plasma membrane should not be rigid structure, right? So what does that mean? The plasma membrane should not be rigid, right? The plasma membrane, if the plasma membrane is rigid structure, it is not going to allow the cell growth or intercellular junction formations or mitotic divisions or meiotic divisions. What does that mean? So if cell is of this much of size, and if the cell wants to grow to a larger size, then the plasma membrane should also extend. This is possible if the nature of the plasma membrane is a fluid nature, is a semi-fluid nature. But instead, if the plasma membrane is rigid in nature, then it will not allow the cellular growth or formation of intercellular junctions. So plasma membrane should possess quasi-fluid nature. Why? So for cellular growth and formation of intercellular junctions. Intercellular junctions means the junctions between the two cells, within the two cells, is called as intercellular junction. So that is the second property that the plasma membrane should possess. And the third property that a plasma membrane should possess is a variable protein is to phospholipid ratio. Right? So you will understand it when you will study the different models of plasma membrane, which means plasma membrane is mainly made up of two components, that is proteins and phospholipids. So the ratio of proteins and phospholipids should be variable, right? So they should move, they should either increase or decrease, right? And this variable ratio will only provide fluid nature. If the ratio of proteins and phospholipids is fixed, right, then the plasma membrane would become a rigid structure. But what we want that the plasma membrane should possess a semi-fluid nature. That should be the property. And how can that be achieved? That can be achieved if the proteins and phospholipids which are present in the plasma membrane should have a variable ratio, which means the ratio should keep on changing, right? So these are the three important properties that a plasma membrane should possess. Plasma membrane, it is a membrane which is bounding a living cell. Remember, a dead cell will not possess a plasma membrane. Which are the properties that a plasma membrane should possess? The first one is it should be a selectively permeable membrane, which means it should selectively allow the entry or exit of certain substances within the cell or outside the cell. Even though the concentration of any particular molecule or ion is high outside the cell, if that is not required by the cell, the plasma membrane is not going to allow it to enter inside the cell. So it should be selectively permeable in nature, quasi-fluid or semi-fluid nature. The plasma membrane should not be rigid, it should be semi-fluid nature. Why is it required? It is required for cellular growth and formation of intercellular junctions. If a cell wants to grow, obviously the plasma membrane has to be expanded, right? If the plasma membrane is rigid, how can it expand? So it should be semi-fluid in nature. And the third property is the ratios of proteins and phospholipids which is present in the plasma membrane should be variable. They should keep on changing. And this property in fact gives the quasi-fluid nature of the plasma membrane. Now there are three important models of the plasma membrane which were proposed by different groups of scientists which you have to study, right? So we will study it